rude mafia boss was feared by everyone in the restaurant, until a new girl faced him without fear. Everyone in the restaurant lowered their eyes when Adrian Volkov walked in. Forks stopped moving. Waiters froze near the walls. Even the pianist missed a note when the city's most feared mafia boss crossed the marble floor with two armed men behind him and rage burning in his eyes. The owner rushed forward, trembling, ready to apologize for a mistake he had not even made yet. But before Adrian could destroy the place with one sentence, a new waitress stepped into his path. Young, unknown, holding a tray in one hand and his untouched wine in the other. Then she looked straight into his cold eyes and said, "Move! You're blocking my table." The whole restaurant went silent, because no one had ever spoken to Adrian Volkov like that and lived peacefully afterward. But instead of ordering her punishment, Adrian stared at her like he had just found the one person in the city who did not fear him, and that made her more dangerous than any enemy he had ever faced. Adrian Volkov did not believe in kindness. Kindness, in his world, was usually a mask worn by cowards, liars, and people waiting for the right moment to betray you. He had learned that lesson before he was old enough to hold a gun, and by the time he became the most feared mafia boss in the city, he had turned cruelty into a language everyone understood. One look from him could empty a room. One phone call could close a business. One insult against his family name could make a powerful man disappear from public life forever. That was why no one at Belladonna dared breathe too loudly when he entered. Belladonna was not just a restaurant. It was where judges came to accept favors, politicians came to make promises, and criminals came to pretend they were gentlemen. Its chandeliers glittered above secrets. Its private rooms had heard more confessions than churches. Every table belonged to someone important. But when Adrian Volkov arrived, even important men became careful. He was in a worse mood than usual that night. A shipment had vanished from the eastern docks. One of his accountants had been found dead in a hotel bathtub. An arrival family had sent him a message written in blood across the hood of one of his cars. The city was testing him. That meant someone had to suffer. The restaurant owner knew at the moment Adrian stepped inside. His face turned pale, his hands shook, and his smile became the desperate smile of a man trying to survive a storm already standing in front of him. "Mr. Volkov," he began softly, "your private room is ready." Adrian did not answer. His eyes moved across the restaurant like a blade. Couples looked down. Businessmen turned away. A senator pretending not to know him suddenly found the wine menu fascinating. Then Adrian saw his usual table occupied. A young man in an expensive suit was sitting there with two friends, laughing too loudly, unaware that the chair beneath him belonged to a man who had ended families for less disrespect. The owner almost collapsed. "I am sorry," he whispered quickly. He was told the table was reserved, but he insisted, "I will remove him immediately." Adrian's expression did not change, but the air around him became colder. His guards took one step forward. The young man finally looked up, saw Adrian, and stopped laughing. His face drained as recognition struck him. Around the room, everyone understood what was about to happen. Someone would be humiliated. Someone might bleed, and no one would interfere. Then she appeared. The new girl. She came from the kitchen carrying a tray of glasses, unaware or unwilling to care that she had walked into the path of the most dangerous man in the city. Her uniform was simple. Her hair was tied back carelessly. There was flour on one sleeve and a small burn mark near her wrist, the kind earned by someone who worked too hard and complained too little. Her name was Mira. She had started at Belladonna only 3 days earlier. No one knew much about her except that she needed the job badly, worked double shifts without asking questions, and had eyes that did not lower easily. The owner had warned her about Adrian Volkov that afternoon. "If he comes in," he had said, sweating even while speaking the name, "you do not look at him. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not correct him. You do not breathe near him unless you are asked." Mira had simply nodded, not because she agreed, because she had heard men threaten the world before. She had survived worse than rude rich men in expensive coats. So when Adrian blocked the aisle and his guards stood like wolves behind him, Mira did not tremble. She did not step back. She looked at the table waiting for its drinks, looked at Adrian standing in her way, and chose the one thing no one in Belladonna had ever chosen. She treated him like an inconvenience. "Move," she said. "You're blocking my table." The sentence struck the restaurant harder than a gunshot. The young man at Adrian's table stopped breathing. The owner whispered, "Oh, God!" One of Adrian's guards reached for his weapon, but Adrian lifted 2 fingers. The guard froze. Adrian looked at Mira, really looked at her. There was no performance in her face, no false bravery, no desperate attempt to impress him. She seemed irritated, tired, and completely unimpressed by the fear that had turned every other person in the room into stone. That irritated him. It also interested him. "Do you know who I am?" Adrian asked. Mira shifted the tray slightly in her hand. "Yes." A murmur passed through the room. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "And you still spoke to me like that?" "I spoke to you like a person standing in the middle of an aisle." For one dangerous second, nothing moved. Then Adrian smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, the kind of smile that made powerful men regret being noticed. "What is your name?" "Mira." "Mira what?" She held his gaze. "Just Mira." Adrian studied her again. Just Mira. No surname. No explanation. No fear. Everyone else saw a reckless waitress who had just invited disaster. Adrian saw a locked door, and he hated locked doors. Before he could answer, the young man at Adrian's table stood in panic. "Mr. Volkov, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know this was your table." Adrian did not look away from Mira. "Sit," he ordered. The young man obeyed instantly, shaking. Mira's expression tightened. He made a mistake. Adrian's gaze sharpened. "Did I ask?" "No," she said, "but you looked like you were about to punish him for having bad timing." The owner looked ready to faint. Adrian stepped closer. Mira stood her ground, but something flickered in her eyes for the first time. Not fear of him. Recognition of danger. Adrian noticed that too. "You defend strangers often?" he asked. "I defend whoever is about to be crushed by someone bigger." The words landed somewhere Adrian did not allow people to touch. For a split second, his face hardened in a different way. Not anger. Memory. A boy on a cold kitchen floor. A father's hand around his mother's wrist. A young Adrian too small to stop the violence, but old enough to remember the sound of someone begging. He buried the memory instantly. The restaurant saw only the Mafia boss turn colder. Adrian glanced at the young man at his table. "Leave." The man stumbled up, almost knocking over his chair, and rushed away with his friends without looking back. Mira exhaled softly, thinking it was over. It was not. Adrian sat at the table and looked at her. "You will serve me tonight." The owner rushed forward. "Of course, sir. She will." "No," Adrian said. "I still on Mira. Only her." Mira's jaw tightened. She knew what men like him did. They turned attention into ownership. They made women feel chosen before they made them feel trapped. But she also needed the money. Her younger brother was hiding in a rented room across the city with a fever that would not break. Her mother's medical debt had fallen into the hands of collectors, and the man who had ruined her family was looking for her. That was why Mira had used no surname. That was why she avoided cameras. That was why she worked at a restaurant owned by cowards and visited by criminals. Because Belladonna was dangerous, but danger also paid in cash. So she walked to Adrian's table and placed the wine down without bowing. "What would you like?" Adrian leaned back, watching her like a puzzle he intended to solve. An apology. Mira looked at him calmly. "For the aisle." "For disrespect." She took out her notepad. "We don't serve that here." A few people nearby stared at their plates to hide their shock. Adrian's mouth curved again, but his eyes stayed sharp. "You think you are brave." "No," Mira said. "I think I'm working." That answer should have angered him. Instead, it unsettled him, because Mira was not trying to win. She was not flirting. She was not begging. She was not playing the dangerous little game most people played around him, offering fear with one hand and ambition with the other. She simply refused to disappear. Adrian ordered nothing for several minutes. He only watched her move through the restaurant, serving tables, correcting a kitchen mistake, helping an older waiter carry a tray, wiping spilled wine from the floor before anyone slipped. She was careful with everyone except him. That made no sense. And anything that made no sense in Adrian's world was either weakness, bait, or threat. Near midnight, the restaurant began to empty. Adrian remained at his table. Mira was counting receipts near the bar when a man in a gray coat entered through the side door. She saw him before anyone else did. Her face changed, only for half a second. But Adrian caught it. The man did not look like a customer. His coat was wet though it had not rained. His smile was too slow. His eyes moved across the room until they landed on Mira. Then he began walking toward her. Mira stepped back. Adrian rose from his chair. The entire restaurant felt the shift. The man in the gray coat stopped when he noticed Adrian, but he did not leave. Instead, he smiled wider. "So this is where you ran," he said to Mira. Mira's hand tightened around the receipt book. Adrian looked from the man to her. For the first time that night, Mira's fearless mask cracked. The man reached into his coat and pulled out a folded photograph. He placed it on the bar. Adrian saw Mira in the picture, younger and terrified, standing beside a hospital bed where a sick boy slept. The man tapped the photo with one finger. "Your brother's fever is getting worse," he said softly, "and your father's debt did not disappear just because you changed your name." Adrian's expression turned unreadable. Mira whispered, "Leave." The man laughed. "You don't give orders, little girl. You pay what your family owes." Adrian stepped forward. The man looked at him and made the mistake of smiling. "This is private business." Adrian's voice was calm, but the room became ice. "Not anymore." Mira looked at him quickly. "Don't." That single word stopped him more effectively than fear ever had. "Do not. Not please. Not help me. Do not enter my life and make it worse." Adrian understood the warning in her eyes. She was not afraid he would lose. She was afraid he would win in a way that would cost her everything. The man in the gray coat leaned closer to Mira. "Tomorrow night. Full payment, or your brother comes with us." Then he walked out. No one moved until the door closed behind him. Adrian turned to Mira. The restaurant had seen her challenge him without fear. Now he had seen what she feared instead. And that changed everything. Mira picked up the photograph with shaking fingers, but before she could hide it, Adrian spoke. "Who owns a debt?" She did not answer. "Mira." Her name in his voice sounded less like a question and more like an order fighting to become concern. She looked up, eyes bright but defiant. "You can scare everyone in this room," she said, "but you cannot scare my problems away." Adrian stepped closer. "No," he said quietly, "but I can scare the men who created them." Mira stared at him, trapped between pride and desperation. Outside, a black car waited under the streetlight. Inside it, the man in the gray coat made a call. "She works for Volkov now," he said. "Tell Roman." On the other end, a deeper voice answered. "Good. Then she will bring him to us." And just like that, Mira was no longer a waitress who had insulted a Mafia boss. She was bait, and Adrian Volkov had already taken the hook. By morning, the entire city knew one thing. A waitress at Belladonna had spoken to Adrian Volkov like he was nobody. By noon, the rumor had changed. She had insulted him, survived, and been chosen to serve his private table. By sunset, the story had become dangerous. Because in Adrian's world, attention was never harmless. If he looked at something too long, his enemies looked too. If he protected someone once, they searched for the weakness behind it. And if he showed even the smallest trace of interest in a woman with no surname, men who hated him began sharpening knives around her name. Mira knew this before anyone warned her. That was why she did not return to Belladonna the next day. She spent the morning in a cramped apartment above a closed bakery, pressing a damp cloth to her younger brother's forehead while the radiator rattled like old bones. Leo was only 16, too thin from weeks of sickness, his skin burning with fever. Every time he coughed, guilt tightened around Mira's chest. Their father's debts had not died with him. They had been inherited like a curse. Loan sharks had first taken their savings, then their apartment, then their mother's treatment fund. When their mother died, Mira thought the nightmare had reached its end. She was wrong. Debts in the criminal world did not end with death. They multiplied. The man in the gray coat was named Pavel. He collected for Roman Sokolov, a rival crime lord who had been circling Adrian Volkov's empire for months. Roman was not as rich as Adrian, not as feared, not as disciplined. But he was patient, and patient men were often more dangerous than violent ones. Mira had worked under false names in 3 places before Belladonna. Roman's men had found her every time. Now they had found her again. By late afternoon, a black envelope appeared beneath her apartment door. No knock, no footsteps, only the soft scrape of paper across wood. Mira picked it up with cold fingers. Inside was a photograph of Leo sleeping in his bed, taken through the window from the building across the street. On the back, one sentence was written in red ink. "Bring Volkov to the old glass factory tonight, or your brother stops breathing before sunrise." Mira stood still for a long time. Outside, traffic moved. People laughed on the street below. Somewhere nearby, a vendor shouted prices for fruit. Life continued with cruel normalcy while Mira's world narrowed to a single choice: betray a man she did not trust, or lose the only family she had left. Adrian Volkov would have called that simple. Mira knew better. There were choices that looked simple only to people who had never been powerless. At Belladonna that evening, Adrian sat at his usual table, untouched wine in front of him, anger hidden beneath stillness. The owner had already apologized 6 times for Mira's absence. Each apology made Adrian quieter. His men stood behind him, tense, because Adrian was rarely loud when displeased. He was surgical. "Find her," he said. Within 20 minutes, his network moved through the city. Hotel clerks were questioned. Security footage was pulled. Street cameras were reviewed. A pharmacy near the old bakery reported that a woman matching Mira's description had bought fever medicine with cash. Adrian watched the footage on a tablet. Mira kept her head down in the recording, her hair tucked beneath a scarf, but he recognized the way she moved. Fast, alert, carrying exhaustion like armor. Then he saw the black envelope in her hand. The image froze. Adrian's eyes narrowed. His second-in-command, Victor, stood beside him. "It could be bait." "It is bait." "Then we don't go." Adrian looked at him. Victor lowered his eyes. Adrian did not tolerate obvious advice dressed as strategy. Still, Victor continued carefully. "Roman Sokolov has been waiting for access to you. The docs, the accountant, the message on the car, all of it was pressure. The girl may be part of it." Adrian looked again at the frozen image of Mira. "No," he said, "she is not part of it. You met her once, and I have met liars my entire life." Victor said nothing. Adrian stood, prepared 2 cars. Quietly. Victor hesitated. "Boss, if she leads you into a trap." Adrian's voice cut through the room. "Then we close the trap on the hand holding it." Across the city, Mira arrived at the old glass factory just after midnight. It stood near the industrial river, abandoned after a fire years earlier. Broken windows lined the upper floors like missing teeth. The air smelled of rust, oil, and wet concrete. A single yellow light burned above the entrance, swinging slightly in the wind. Pavel waited inside. 4 men stood with him. Mira's eyes searched the shadows. "Where is Leo?" Pavel smiled. "Alive, for now. You promised proof." He lifted his phone and showed her a live video feed. Leo was tied to a chair in their apartment, barely conscious, his head hanging forward. One of Roman's men stood behind him with a gun. "You know, Adrian, fear is a fascinating currency. You have spent years making the city afraid of you. But fear has a flaw. It creates silence, and silence creates blind spots." Adrian looked up. "Come down and speak like a man." Roman smiled. "Men who speak near you tend to disappear. Only when they bore me." A few of Roman's men shifted uneasily. Roman's smile tightened. "You think this is confidence. It is habit. You have ruled so long that you forgot every empire is most vulnerable the moment everyone believes it cannot fall." Adrian stepped farther into the factory. Mira moved instinctively toward him, then stopped herself. She had betrayed him into danger. She had no right to stand behind his protection. Roman noticed the movement and smiled. "She is interesting, isn't she?" I wondered what kind of woman could make Adrian Volkov pause. Then I discovered she was not brave, just desperate. Mira lowered her eyes. Adrian's voice was cold. "Do not speak about her." Roman's gaze sharpened. There it was. The weakness. Not love, not yet, but instinct. Adrian had reacted. Roman had seen it. "Remarkable," Roman said softly. "One night, and you are already possessive. Mira looked at Adrian quickly. Don't listen to him. But Roman continued. Did he tell you what happens to women who stand too close to him? They become messages, leverage, graves with pretty names. Adrian's jaw tightened. Roman turned toward Mira. He will ruin you and call it protection. The words hit too close to the fear she already carried. For 1 second, Adrian saw doubt cross her face. It angered him more than the guns. Not because she doubted him, because Roman understood exactly where to press. Roman raised his hand, and the live video of Leo appeared on a large crack monitor at the back of the factory. The boy was still tied to the chair, breathing shallowly. Mira took a step forward. Please, let him go. I did what you asked. Roman looked almost sympathetic. You did, and now you will do one more thing. A man brought a gun and placed it on a metal table in front of Mira. Her face drained. Roman's voice lowered. Shoot Adrian Volkov. Not kill him, just wound him. A public enough wound to prove he can bleed. Then your brother lives. Mira stared at the gun. Adrian did not move. Pavel smiled beside her. Go on. He is a monster. Everyone knows it. Mira's hand trembled. She looked at Adrian. He stood beneath broken glass and rusted beams, surrounded by enemies, betrayed into a trap, and still watching her with that impossible calm. Do it, he said. Mira's breath caught. Roman laughed quietly. Listen to him. Even now he orders people beautifully. Adrian ignored Roman. His eyes stayed on Mira. Pick it up. She shook her head. No. If your brother dies because of my pride, you will hate me more than you hate them. I won't shoot you. Yes, Adrian said. You will. His voice was hard, but something beneath it was not cruelty. It was calculation. It was understanding. It was a man who had spent his life reading violence and had already seen the shape of the room. Mira slowly picked up the gun. It felt heavier than it should have. Roman leaned forward, eager now. Adrian looked at her, and for the first time since she had met him, his expression shifted into something almost human. Good girl, Pavel muttered. Mira turned and shot Pavel in the knee. His scream ripped through the factory. Everything exploded. Adrian moved before Roman's men could process what had happened. 2 suppressed shots cracked from outside the broken windows. Roman's men on the upper railing dropped almost simultaneously. Victor's team, hidden exactly where Adrian had placed them. Mira stumbled back as gunfire erupted across the factory. Adrian grabbed her by the wrist and pulled her behind a stack of old metal sheets as bullets sparked against concrete. You came alone, she gasped. Adrian reloaded without looking at her. I walked in alone. You knew. I knew Roman would ask you to choose. Mira stared at him, breathing hard. And you knew I wouldn't shoot you. Adrian looked at her. No, he said. I knew you would shoot the right person. The answer hit her harder than she expected. Trust from Adrian Volkov did not come softly. It came like a weapon placed in her hands. The fight moved through the factory in flashes of muzzle fire and shadows. Adrian's men entered through the side entrances, precise and ruthless. Roman's ambush began collapsing, but Roman was not finished. The monitor changed. Leo's live feed vanished. Mira's blood went cold. Roman's voice came through the factory speakers. You are very dramatic, Adrian. But while you were arranging your little counterattack, my men moved the boy. Mira froze. Adrian's eyes lifted toward the upper office. Roman stood behind the glass, smiling. Now the girl comes with me, Roman said, or a brother dies somewhere you will never find him. Mira's face crumbled. Adrian saw it. In that moment, he could have ordered a full assault. He could have captured Roman, tortured the location out of him, made the whole factory drown in blood. That was what the old Adrian would have done. But Mira's brother might not have survived the delay. So Adrian lowered his gun. Victor, entering from the side corridor, looked shocked. Boss! Roman laughed from above. Now that is beautiful. Mira grabbed Adrian's arm. No, don't surrender for me. Adrian looked down at her hand on his sleeve. The same woman who had faced him without fear was trembling now, not for herself, but for a sick boy held by monsters. Something inside him, something he had buried since childhood, recognized the shape of that fay. The fear of being too small to save someone you love. He turned to Victor. Find the boy. Victor understood the hidden order instantly and disappeared into the smoke. Roman's men closed in around Adrian and Mira. Pavel lay on the floor, groaning, clutching his knee. Mira whispered, "Why are you doing this?" Adrian's mouth tightened. He did not know how to say, "Because you stood in front of me like fear had not trained you yet." He did not know how to say, "Because everyone in my life either obeyed me or betrayed me, but you did neither." He did not know how to say, "Because when you told me to move, for the first time in years I felt like a man in someone's way, not a king in an empty room." So he said the only thing he could, "Because Roman touched what was not his." Mira's eyes flashed. "I am not yours." "No," Adrian said, looking toward the upper office where Roman waited. "That is why this matters." Roman's men forced him up the stairs at gunpoint. In the upper office, Roman waited beside a table covered with files, photographs, and maps of Adrian's routes. Mira saw pictures of dock warehouses, accountants, drivers, Belladonna's back entrance, and Adrian's private residence. Roman had not planned one ambush. He had planned a takeover. Adrian saw the same thing and understood immediately. Roman had an insider, someone close, someone with access to routes, schedules, and internal accounts. Roman followed his gaze. "You are wondering who sold you." Adrian's expression did not change. Roman smiled. "That is a tragedy of ruling by fear. Eventually, even loyal men start dreaming about the day you are gone." He placed a file in front of Adrian. Inside was a photograph of Victor meeting one of Roman's men near the eastern docks. Mira looked at Adrian. For the first time, she saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes. Not surprise. Wound. Victor was not only his second-in-command. He was the closest thing Adrian had left to family. Roman leaned in. "He gave me your accountant, your shipment route, and tonight he will give me your city." Mira shook her head. "You're lying." Roman looked amused. "Am I?" At that exact moment, Adrian's phone buzzed. A message appeared from an unknown number. "The boy is safe." Adrian looked at the screen once, then placed the phone face down. Roman did not notice, but Mira did. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Leo was safe. Adrian had done it. The terror that had held her upright all night broke apart, so suddenly her knees nearly gave way. Adrian subtly shifted his body between her and Roman. Roman lifted his gun and pointed it at Adrian's chest. "You were feared by everyone because they thought you had no heart. But tonight, a waitress proved you do. That means your legend is over." Adrian looked at him calmly. "No," he said. "It means yours never began." The lights went out. For 3 seconds, the room became pure darkness. Then came the sound of glass breaking, bodies hitting the floor, and suppressed gunfire from inside the walls. When the emergency lights flickered on, Victor stood in the doorway with blood on his shirt and a gun in his hand. Mira's stomach dropped. Roman smiled triumphantly. Perfect timing. Adrian turned slowly. Victor raised his weapon, but he did not aim at Adrian. He aimed at Roman, and fired. The bullet struck Roman's shoulder, spinning him into the table. His gun flew across the office floor. Adrian moved immediately, driving Roman backward against the window as Victor's men flooded the room and disarmed the remaining guards. Roman gasped, bleeding and furious. "You betrayed me." Victor stepped forward, eyes cold. "No, I fed you what Adrian told me to feed you." Mira stared at Adrian. Adrian had known. The photograph, the roots, the accountant's death, the missing shipment, Roman's confidence. It had all been part of a deeper game. Roman, wounded and trapped, began to laugh through pain. "You used the girl too." Mira turned sharply toward Adrian. The accusation landed exactly where Roman wanted it to. Adrian's silence lasted half a second too long. Mira stepped back. The room was still full of guns, blood, and smoke, but her eyes focused only on him. "Did you?" she asked. Adrian looked at her. For once, the truth did not serve him. He could lie. He was good at lying. He could soften it, reshape it, tell her he had only followed the threat once it appeared. But Mira had faced him without fear. She deserved more than the kind of protection built from deception. "Yes," Adrian said. The word cracked something between them. Mira went pale. Adrian continued, voice control but lower. When I saw the envelope, I knew Roman wanted to use you to reach me. I let him think it worked. You let me walk into this. I had men on your apartment before you left. Your brother was never alone after sunset. Mira's eyes filled, not with relief, but fury. You knew I thought he would die. Adrian did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. She slapped him. The sound cut through the office sharper than any gunshot. Every man in the room froze. No one touched Mira. No one even breathed. Adrian slowly turned his face back to her. Mira's voice shook. You are exactly what Roman said. You turn people into moves on a board. Adrian's expression hardened, but the wound beneath it was visible now. I saved your brother. You used my fear to catch your enemy. I did both. Her tears spilled, but her spine stayed straight. Then don't pretend you are better than him just because you win cleaner. Adrian nodded once, then looked at Mira. Your brother is waiting in a safe clinic. A doctor is with him. Mira swallowed hard. For one moment, gratitude and anger warred across her face. Then anger won. Take me to him, she said. Adrian gestured toward the door, but Mira stepped past him without accepting his hand. The distance between them was only a few inches. It felt wider than the whole city. As they left the factory, Roman was dragged behind them, bleeding but alive. His ambush had failed. His men were captured. His network was exposed. Adrian Volkov should have felt triumph. Instead, he watched Mira walk ahead of him into the cold night, shoulders rigid, refusing to look back. And for the first time in years, Adrian understood a terrifying truth. Fear could force obedience. Power could buy loyalty. Violence could end enemies. But none of it could make one fearless woman trust him. From the back seat of the armored car, Mira looked at the city lights through the window and whispered only one sentence. I don't owe you my forgiveness. Adrian sat beside her, blood on his cuff, smoke in his coat, and a silence in his chest he did not know how to name. No, he said quietly. You don't. Behind them, the old glass factory burned. Ahead of them, Leo was alive. And somewhere inside Adrian Volkov's empire, an enemy had just learned that Mira was not merely bait. She was the one weakness Adrian could not control. That meant the next attack would not be against his business. It would be against his heart. The clinic looked peaceful from the outside. That was the first thing that made Adrian suspicious. It stood at the edge of the financial district, hidden behind a private wellness center used by rich men who wanted problems treated quietly. No emergency lights. No police. No crowds. Just white walls, tinted glass, and a single security guard near the entrance pretending not to recognize the black cars arriving at the curb. Mira stepped out before Adrian could open the door. She was still angry. He could see it in the way she refused to look back, the way her hands were clenched at her sides, the way she carried fear for her brother like a wound she would not allow anyone to touch. Adrian followed at a distance, not because he lacked authority, because for once, authority would not help him. Inside, the hallway smelled of antiseptic and fresh paint. Victor walked ahead with two men, checking every corner. The doctor met them near the private ward, nervous but composed. The boy is stable, he said quickly. Severe infection, dehydration, exhaustion, but he is conscious. Mira did not wait for permission. She pushed past him and entered the room. Leo lay beneath white sheets, and 4 lines taped to his arm, his face pale but alive. The moment he saw Mira, his eyes filled with weak relief. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him, careful not to disturb the wires. All the strength she had forced into herself collapsed in that single embrace. Her shoulders shook. Leo held her with one thin arm, whispering that he was okay, even though he looked like he had barely survived the night. Adrian stopped at the doorway. He did not enter. The sight did something violent to him in silence. A sister holding the only person she had left. A boy too young to know why criminals had circled his life. A woman who had walked into a trap because love had left her no other choice. Adrian understood that kind of love. He had buried it under empire, reputation, and blood. But he understood it. Mira looked over Leo's shoulder and saw Adrian standing outside the room. For 1 second, gratitude almost softened her face. Then she remembered the factory, the envelope, the terror he had allowed her to carry because it served his plan. The softness vanished. Adrian accepted it without defending himself. He deserved worse. Victor approached quietly. Roman is being moved to the lower level. Adrian's eyes stayed on Mira and Leo. Alive? Yes. Make sure he remains that way until I question him. Victor nodded, then hesitated. Adrian looked at him. Speak. The files from the factory confirmed Roman had help, but not enough to explain everything. Someone gave him the clinic location after we rescued the boy. Adrian went still. What did you say? Victor lowered his voice. Roman's men were already watching this district before we arrived. They knew the boy would be brought somewhere medical. Adrian turned slowly toward the hallway. Every instinct in him sharpened. The clinic was not the end of the rescue. It was a second trap. At that exact moment, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then the entire clinic went dark. Mira lifted her head. Leo's monitor gave a long warning beep before switching to backup power. Adrian stepped into the room immediately. Get away from the window. Mira's anger disappeared beneath terror. What's happening? Before Adrian could answer, the window exploded inward. Bullets ripped through the room. Adrian threw himself across Mira and Leo, driving them off the bed and onto the floor as glass sprayed over the sheets. The doctor screamed. Victor's men fired back into the darkness outside, muzzle flashes lighting the room in violent bursts. Mira clutched Leo against her chest, shielding his body with haze. Adrian crouched above them, his gun already in his hand. This was not Roman. Roman was wounded, captured, and too arrogant to plan this quietly. This was cleaner, colder, personal. Smoke began slipping beneath the door. Not fire smoke. Tear gas. Adrian's jaw tightened. Victor. Victor appeared at the doorway, covering his mouth with his sleeve. North stairwell is blocked. South exit has shooters. Adrian looked at Leo. The boy could barely stand. Mira understood immediately. They could fight their way out, but Leo could not run. Another burst of gunfire shattered the medical cabinet. Mira flinched but did not scream. Adrian saw the fear in her eyes and hated that he had taught her one more reason not to trust him. He grabbed a blanket, wrapped it around Leo's shoulders, and lifted the boy carefully. Mira stared at him. For a moment, she looked as if she wanted to say no, as if even now she could not bear to place her brother's life in Adrian's hands. But the hallway filled with armed men. There was no time left for pride. Adrian carried Leo out with Mira pressed close behind him. Victor moved ahead, firing twice, dropping a mass attack into the nurse's station. The clinic's white floors became streaked with blood and broken glass. Alarm screamed. Emergency lights bathed everything red. They reached the service corridor. A masked man stepped from a laundry room and aimed at Mira. Adrian turned his body before thinking. The bullet hit him in the shoulder. He staggered but did not drop Leo. Mira saw the impact, so the blood spread across his coat, and something inside her cracked despite everything. Adrian. He fired once. The attacker fell. Adrian kept moving. No dramatic pause. No speech. No demand for concern. Just pain buried under purpose. They reached the basement elevator, but the panel was dead. Victor cursed and pulled open the side access door to the maintenance stairwell. 2 floors down. Armored exit. Adrian handed Leo to Victor. Mira looked shocked. What are you doing? Taking the stairs behind you. No, Mira. The way he said her name stopped her. Not like an order this time. Like a man asking her to survive even if she hated him after. She grabbed his wounded arm. Don't do that. Don't act like dying fixes what you did. Adrian looked at her hand on him. For a second, the gunfire faded behind the sound of his own heartbeat. Then he leaned closer. I'm not dying for forgiveness. His eyes lifted to haze. I'm buying time. Before she could answer, he pushed her through the stairwell door after Victor and slammed it shut. Mira hit the other side with both hands. Adrian. He heard her voice through the metal. It followed him as he turned back toward the corridor. For the first time that night, Adrian Volkov smiled without cruelty. Then he walked into the smoke. The attackers advanced from both ends. 6 men, maybe more behind them. Adrian was wounded, outnumbered, and half-blinded by gas. It should have been enough. It was not. The first man came too close and lost his weapon before he understood the mistake. Adrian used him as a shield, fired over his shoulder, and dropped 2 more. A bullet grazed Adrian's ribs. Another tore through his coat. He moved through pain like it was weather. But his enemies were not amateurs. They were disciplined, silent, coordinated, mercenaries. Someone had paid professionals, not street soldiers. Adrian drove one attacker through a glass partition, seized his radio, and heard a voice crackle through the channel. Do not kill the girl. The boy is disposable. Volkov alive if possible. Adrian froze. Alive if possible. That was not Roman style. Roman wanted humiliation. This person wanted ownership. Adrian pressed the radio closer. Another voice answered. The woman is priority. Bring her to the lower garage. Adrian's face turned colder than the clinic floor. They were not attacking him. They were taking Mira. He ran for the stairs. Below, Victor reached the lower level with Mira and Leo, only to stop abruptly. The basement exit was open. 2 open. 3 black SUVs waited in the garage with engines running. The security gate had been cut. 2 of Adrian's own guards lay unconscious near the wall. Victor lifted his gun. But before he could move, the elevator doors behind them opened. A woman stepped out. Tall, elegant, wearing a deep green coat and black gloves. Her hair was silver blonde, pulled into a smooth knot. Her face was calm in a way old money was calm, untouched by panic because it had spent a lifetime hiring other people to bleed. Victor's eyes widened. Mira did not know the woman, but she knew instantly that everyone else did. The woman smiled at Victor as if greeting a servant, still following him like a loyal dog. Victor's face hardened. Irina. Mira looked between them. Irina Volkov, Adrian's aunt. The woman who had controlled Volkov money before Adrian took power. The woman rumored to have retired after her husband's death. The woman everyone believed had no interest in the criminal thrown in the mall. She stepped closer, her gaze landing on Leo first, then Mira. So this is a waitress. Mira moved in front of her brother. Irina's smile deepened. There it is. The same foolish courage. Victor aimed at her. Move aside. Irina did not even blink. You will not shoot me in front of my nephew's little obsession. Victor's finger tightened. Then a gun pressed against the back of his head. One of Adrian's guards. A man Victor had trusted for 6 years. Mira's stomach dropped. The betrayal was everywhere. Irina walked past Victor and stopped in front of Mira. Up close, she smelled of expensive perfume and cold rain. You cause a great deal of inconvenience, Irina said. Mira lifted her chin. I don't even know you. No, Irina replied. But Adrian does. That is why you matter. Leo coughed weakly behind her. Mira's fear sharpened. Let my brother go. Irina's eyes flicked to him with mild boredom. Children are always useful until they are not. Mira lunged toward her. A guard grabbed her arms. Leo shouted her name, trying to stand, but another man shoved him back against the wall. Victor struggled, but the gun at his head held him still. Pain flashed through him, bright and blinding. Irina stepped into the SUV. Mira saw the vehicle begin to move. If Irina escaped, this would never end. She looked at the garage control panel beside the exit ramp, then at the SUV, then at Adrian, still fighting to stand. Mira ran for the panel. Mira! Adrian shouted. Irina's driver accelerated toward the exit. Mira reached the controls and slammed the emergency barrier switch. The steel gate dropped halfway. The SUV crashed into it with a brutal metallic scream. The front of the vehicle crushed inward. Smoke burst from the engine. Irina was thrown against the side window, dazed but alive. Adrian rose, breathing hard, blood running down his arm. The garage fell into a broken silence as the last of Irina's men either dropped their weapons or fell under Victor's team. Adrian walked toward the wrecked SUV. Irina stumbled out, one hand pressed against her bleeding forehead. Her perfect composure finally cracked. She looked at Mira first. Hatred entered her face. You, she spat, a nobody waitress. Mira stood near the control panel, shaking but upright. Adrian stepped between them. Irina laughed bitterly. Look at you, bleeding for her. Your father would be proud. Adrian stopped. For a moment, the old wound opened again. Then Mira spoke from behind him. Maybe that's the point. Adrian turned slightly. Mira's voice shook, but she did not stop. Maybe being like his father is the first decent thing he's done. Irina's face twisted. Adrian looked back at his aunt, and for the first time, he did not look like a boy standing before the woman who made him. He looked like a man finally done surviving her. Irina reached for the small pistol hidden inside her coat. Adrian saw it. Victor saw it. Mira saw it too. But Leo, weak and terrified behind the pillar, saw it last and shouted Adrian's name. Adrian fired. Irina's pistol flew from her hand and skidded across the floor. She collapsed to her knees, clutching her wrist, breathing hard. Adrian approached her slowly. Every person in the garage watched. They expected execution. Irina expected it too. She lifted her chin, blood on her face, pride still clinging to her like jewelry. "Do it," she whispered. "Be what I made." Adrian pointed the gun at her. His hand was steady. Mira held her breath. The old Adrian would have killed her without hesitation. The feared boss, the rude tyrant, the man who turned pain into punishment and called it order. But the man standing there had heard Mira say move without fear, had watched her choose a brother over herself, had seen her rage at him because she still believed people should be more than tools. And somehow, that belief had become more dangerous than any bullet. Adrian lowered the gun. Irina's eyes widened. "No," she said, as if mercy itself disgusted her. Adrian's voice was cold, but not empty. "You wanted a monster because monsters are easy to predict. They kill, they conquer, they repeat. But I am done being your proof." Irina trembled with fury. "Weak!" Adrian leaned closer. "No, free." He ordered Victor's men to take her alive. Not to prison. Not yet. First to every Volkov captain, every banker, every judge, every silent partner who had feared Irina's shadow for decades. They would hear her confession. They would see the evidence. They would watch her empire removed piece by piece until nothing remained but the truth. For Irina Volkov, death would have been theatrical. Adrian gave her humiliation instead. As they dragged her away, she looked once more at Mira. "This is not love," Irina hissed. "This is another cage." Mira stepped forward before Adrian could answer. "No," she said. "A cage is when someone decides it will lie for you and calls it protection." Then she looked at Adrian. Her words landed exactly where they needed to. Adrian did not flinch, but his face changed. Because she was not only speaking to Irina, she was speaking to him too. Hours later, the clinic garage was empty except for police cleaners paid never to ask questions, Volkov men securing evidence, and the first pale light of morning slipping through the broken exit gate. Leo was taken to a safer medical facility with Mira beside him. Victor survived his wound and, for once, obeyed the doctor's order to sit down. Roman Sokolov, Irina's disposable pawn, confessed enough within an hour to save what remained of his own life. Adrian stood alone near the smashed SUV, blood dried on his shirt, smoke hanging in the cold air. He had won. Roman was broken. Irina was captured. The traitors were exposed. Mira and Leo were alive. And still, when Mira returned from the ambulance entrance and stood a few feet away from him, Adrian felt no victory. She looked exhausted, her face pale, her uniform torn, her hands scraped from the garage controls. But her eyes were still the same. Direct, unbent, fearless, not because she had no fear, but because she refused to let fear become her master. Adrian looked at her and understood why she had unsettled him from the beginning. Everyone else had feared the monster. Mira had judged the man, and the man had been found guilty. He spoke first. "I owe you the truth." Mira crossed her arms, protecting herself without stepping back. "You owe me more than that." "Yes." The answer surprised her. Adrian took a slow breath. "Your brother's treatment will be paid for, not as a debt, not as leverage. It will be arranged through a trust you control." Mira's expression tightened. "I don't want your money buying my silence." "It won't." "Then what do you want?" Adrian looked at the broken gate, then back at her. For once, there was no arrogance in his face. "I want to learn how to help without owning." Mira went still. It was not an apology wrapped in poetry. It was not a promise of love. It was something harder for a man like Adrian Volkov, an admission that he did not know how. Myra's anger did not vanish. It should not have, but something in her face shifted. Not forgiveness. Recognition. You don't get trust because you saved us, she said. You earn it by not using us again. Adrian nodded. Then I will earn it. Behind them, Leo called weakly from the ambulance. Myra turned immediately, but before she walked away, Adrian spoke again. Myra. She paused. If you want to leave the city, Victor will arrange it. No tracking. No guards unless you ask. No conditions. Myra looked back at him. For the first time since the factory, he saw surprise enter her eyes. Because this was the one thing no powerful man in her life had ever offered honestly. A choice. She said nothing. Then she walked away. Adrian watched her go, and for the first time, he did not follow. That was the hardest thing he had done all night. Because Irina had been right about one thing. Myra had become his weakness. But Irina had misunderstood the nature of weakness. A weakness was not always the place where a man could be destroyed. Sometimes it was the first place where he became human. As the ambulance doors closed behind Myra and Leo, Adrian stood in the ruined garage with blood on his hands and the city waiting for orders. He could still command fear. He could still break enemies. He could still make powerful men kneel. But now there was one woman in the city who had looked at him, seen the monster clearly, and demanded something better. And that terrified him more than any war. Because the next battle would not be against Roman, Irina, or any rival family. The next battle would be against the man Adrian had been trained to become. And for Myra's trust, he would have to defeat that man without firing a single shot. For 3 days, Adrian Volkov did not appear at the hospital. Not because he was hiding. Not because he was wounded too badly to move. Because for the first time in his life, he understood that protection was not always presence. Sometimes protection meant staying away long enough for a terrified woman to breathe without wondering what the most powerful man in the city would demand in return. So Adrian sent doctors, medicine, legal papers, and security that answered only to Myra. Not to him, not to Victor, to Myra. The trust for Leo's treatment was created under her control. The apartment above the bakery was quietly removed from Roman Sokolov's debt records. The men who had hunted her family disappeared from the streets, not into graves, but into courtrooms, exile, and prisons where Adrian's money no longer protected them. It was the cleanest revenge he had ever taken, and somehow the hardest, because no one feared a man for doing the right thing quietly. Fear had always been Adrian's language. Now he had to learn another. Myra noticed everything. The doctor who stopped asking for payment. The nurse who said Leo's full treatment had already been arranged. The lawyer who arrived with documents proving her father's debt had been illegal from the beginning. The private security woman outside Leo's room who told Myra, calmly, I work for you. If Mr. Volkov tries to enter and you say no, I stop him. That sentence stayed with her. If Mr. Volkov tries to enter and you say no, I stop him. For most people, it was just a security instruction. For Myra, it was the first time power had stood beside her without closing its hand around her throat. Leo recovered slowly. His fever broke on the second night. By the fourth morning, he was sitting up, pale but smiling, asking for real food and pretending not to notice when Myra cried into his blanket. You like him, Leo said weakly. Myra wiped her face quickly. You almost died, and this is what you want to discuss. Leo gave her the exhausted smirk of a younger brother who had survived enough to become annoying again. He carried me while bleeding. He also used us in a Mafia trap. That's bad. Yes. But he saved us. That does not erase the bad. Leo looked at her carefully. No, but it makes things complicated. Myra looked out the window at the city. Complicated was too gentle a word. Adrian Volkov had terrified everyone around him. He had turned her fear into strategy. He had lied by omission, controlled the board, and moved through violence as if it were natural weather. But he had also lowered his gun when killing Irina would have been easier. He had offered Myra a choice when every other powerful person had offered only pressure. He had stayed away when his presence could have made her feel trapped. That did not make him good, but it made him different from the man she had first faced in the restaurant. And different, in Adrian's world, was dangerous. On the fifth evening, Myra found a black envelope outside Leo's hospital room. Her blood went cold before she touched it. For one terrifying second, she was back in the apartment, holding Roman's threat, seeing her brother's photograph and believing the world had no mercy left. Then she noticed this envelope was not sealed. Inside was a single card. No threats, no orders, only an address and 6 words written in dark ink. Belladonna belongs to you now. Mira stared at the card for a long time. Then she turned it over. On the back was another line. Not as a gift, as repayment for what my world cost you. She should have been angry. Part of her was. Because men like Adrian always thought they could fix damage by handing over buildings, money, documents, power. But beneath that anger was something she did not know how to name. He had not asked her to meet him. He had not asked for thanks. He had given her the restaurant where she had first challenged him, the place where everyone bowed to him, and placed it under her name. No conditions, no hidden clause, no chain. That night, Mira went to Belladonna. The restaurant was closed. Its chandeliers were dimmed. Chairs were stacked on tables. The marble floor had been polished until it reflected the empty room like water. Adrian stood near the table that used to be his. He did not turn immediately when she entered. His left arm was in a sling beneath his coat. A bruise darkened one side of his jaw. He looked less untouchable than before, and somehow more dangerous because of it. Mira stopped a few feet away. You bought me a restaurant. Adrian looked at her then. I returned something. It was never mine. No, he said, but it was where my world found you. Mira's eyes moved around the room. She remembered the silence when he entered, the fear, the owner trembling, the way everyone had waited for him to humiliate someone, the way she had stood in his path with a tray and more exhaustion than wisdom. You could have just apologized, she said. I am doing that too. Mira crossed her arms. Then do it without real estate. Adrian accepted the strike with a small nod. Then he stepped away from his old table, giving her space before speaking. I am sorry I used your fear. I am sorry I let you believe Leo might die when I already had men protecting him. I am sorry I treated your pain like a useful piece of my wool. I told myself the result justified it because your brother lived and Roman fell. His voice lowered. But that is how men like me excuse becoming worse. Mira studied him silently. Adrian continued, each word controlled but honest. You were right. Saving someone does not give me the right to use them. Paying a debt does not erase harm. And protecting you means nothing if I take away your choice while doing it. The restaurant felt different now. Not empty. Listening. Mira wanted the apology to be weak. She wanted to reject it easily. She wanted him to be exactly the monster she had accused him of being, so her heart would stop searching for evidence of something else. But Adrian Volkov did not beg. He did not dramatize. He stood there with his pride wounded more deeply than his body and admitted the truth without asking her to soften it. That made anger harder to hold cleanly. You scare people, she said. Yes. You enjoy it. Adrian was quiet for a moment. I did. Mira caught the past tense. Did. His gaze dropped briefly to the polished floor. Fear was simple. It kept people away. It made betrayal easier to see. It made obedience faster than trust. And now I know fear can empty a room, he said, looking back at her, but it cannot make anyone stay. Mira felt the words more than she wanted to, because he was not only speaking about power. He was speaking about himself. Adrian reached into his coat and placed a folder on the table between them. Mira did not touch it. What is that? Everything Irina stole. Names, accounts, judges, offshore companies, debt ledgers, roots. Enough to destroy the old Volkov structure. Mira frowned. Why show me? Because Belladonna was part of it. She looked around sharply. Adrian nodded once. Private rooms, illegal meetings, bribes, debt contracts, blackmail recordings. Your new restaurant has blood in its walls. Mira's face hardened. Then why would you give it to me? Because I am shutting the old system down. But this place can become something else if you want it. If I want it. Yes. And if I don't. I sell it, close it, burn the records, and you never have to see it again. Mira stared at him. There it was again. Choice. Not perfect. Not innocent. But real. She walked slowly to the nearest table and ran her fingers across the white cloth. For years, Belladonna had been a place where powerful men whispered and frightened people obeyed. A restaurant where the owner bowed, staff stayed silent, and fear was treated like good manners. Mira imagined reopening it with different rules. No private rooms for criminals. No staff forced to lower their eyes. No girl warned not to breathe near powerful men. The thought was impossible. Then it was not. "What happens to you?" she asked. Adrian's face did not change, but she saw the question reach him. "What do you mean?" "If you shut down the old system. If you expose Irina's money. If you remove the debt networks. What happens to the feared Adrian Volkov?" His mouth curved faintly, not quite a smile. "He becomes less profitable." "That is not an answer." "No," he said. "It is a beginning of one." Mira looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up the folder. "I'll look at it." Adrian nodded. That was all. No victory in his expression. No claim. No satisfaction. Only a quiet acknowledgement that she had accepted information, not him. Mira turned to leave, but stopped near the entrance. "Adrian." He looked at her. "I am not forgiving you tonight." "I know. And I am not yours." His eyes held hers. "I know." She opened the door. Before stepping out, she said, "But if this restaurant becomes mine, your table is not reserved anymore." For the first time since she had met him, Adrian laughed softly, not cruelly, not like a king amused by a servant, like a man surprised by light in a room he had kept dark for too long. "Understood," he said. Belladonna reopened 6 weeks later. The city came out of curiosity at first. Politicians wanted to see whether Adrian still owned the shadows. Criminals wanted to test whether the restaurant was still useful. Rich men wanted to sit where fear one Saturday. Mira refused half of them at the door. That became the new rumor. The waitress who faced Adrian Volkov now owned Belladonna, and she turned away men who had once believed the city belonged to them. The staff changed too. The old owner was gone. The waiters no longer whispered warnings like prayers. The kitchen workers were paid on time. The private rooms were converted into open dining spaces with glass walls and no locked doors. On opening night, Adrian came alone. No guards visible. No dramatic entrance. Just a dark chute, a healing shoulder, and the same cold eyes that still made the room notice him. People turned silent out of habit. Mira walked toward him with a menu in hand. For a moment, everyone waited to see whether the old fear would return. Mira stopped in front of him. "Table for one." Adrian looked at the room, then back at her. "If you have space." A ripple moved through the restaurant, not because the words were dramatic, because Adrian Volkov had asked. Mira showed him to a table near the center of the room, not the best table, not the private one, not the place where men came to feel untouchable. A normal table. Adrian sat without complaint. That single act traveled faster than any threat he had ever made. Over the next months, the city changed in ways no one expected. Roman Sokolov was tried quietly by people who had once feared his name. His empire collapsed under its own ledges. Irina Volkov lived long enough to watch every loyalist abandon her, every account frozen, every portrait removed from Volkov properties. Her name became what she had feared most. A cautionary story. Adrian dismantled the debt houses first, then the illegal clinics, then the docks that moved human lives like cargo. Some captains resisted. Some called him weak. Some tried to replace him. They learned quickly that Adrian had not become harmless. He had become precise. The difference was that his violence no longer served pride. It served an ending. And slowly, painfully, the feared Volkov Empire began turning into something no one had a name for yet. Not clean, not innocent, but no longer fed by the helpless. Mira did not rush toward him. She did not become his reward for changing. She built Belladonna. She took Leo to therapy. She learned the language of contracts, taxes, permits, and power. She argued with suppliers, fired corrupt managers, and once threw a city councilman out for touching a waitress's wrist. Adrian heard about that and sent flowers. Mira sent them back with a note. "Do not reward basic decency." The next day, he sent a handwritten apology to the waitress instead. Mira kept that one. Trust did not arrive like romance in a song. It came slowly, in small proof, Adrian calling before visiting. Adrian leaving when she said she was tired. Adrian telling the truth even when the truth made him look worse. Adrian asking Leo about school without turning the conversation into a favor owed. Adrian sitting at the ordinary table every Friday night, ordering black coffee he barely drank, while the restaurant learned not to tremble around him. One evening, months after the night in the clinic garage, Mira found him standing outside Belladonna after closing. Snow had begun falling, soft and silent, turning the city's sharp edges gentle for once. "You're late," she said. "I was not sure I should come." "That never stopped you before." "No," Adrian said. That was a problem. Mira looked at him, surprised by the answer. He held out a small box. She stared at it and immediately stepped back. Absolutely not. For a second, Adrian looked confused. Then he understood and almost smiled. "It is not jewelry." Mira narrowed her eyes. Inside the box was a key. Plain, silver, ordinary. Her expression shifted. "What is this?" "The last private room key." Mira looked toward the restaurant. "I thought we removed all the locks." There was one hidden service room behind the old wine cellar. Irina used it for recordings. "I found it this morning." Mira took the key carefully. "What's inside?" "Nothing now. I cleared it." Her eyes lifted. Adrian corrected himself immediately. "Victor cleared it. The records are copied and sealed. You decide what happens to the room." Mira smiled faintly. "You are learning." "I am trying." The snow fell between them. For a while, neither spoke. Then Mira asked, "Do you still want people to fear you?" Adrian looked down the street, where the city lights blurred through the snow. "Some people, yes." She almost laughed. "Honest." "But not everyone," he said. "Not children. Not waiters. Not women trying to survive men who think money makes them gods." Mira's smile faded into something softer. "And me?" Adrian looked at her then. "Never you." The words were simple. That made them dangerous. Mira could have stepped away. Months earlier, she would have. Instead, she moved closer, slowly enough that the choice belonged to her in every inch. Adrian did not reach first. He had learned that too. Mira placed her hand in his. His fingers closed carefully around Hayes, as if the most feared man in the city had finally found something he was afraid to break. She looked at him and said, "This does not mean I trust you completely." "I know." "It does not mean I forgot." "I know." "And if you ever use my fear against me again." "I won't." "Let me finish." He went silent immediately. Mira's mouth curved. "If you ever use my fear against me again, I will throw you out of my restaurant in front of everyone." Adrian looked at Belladonna, then back at her. "That would damage my reputation." "Good." This time, his smile reached his eyes. Years later, people still told the story of the night Adrian Volkov walked into Belladonna and a new waitress told him to move. Some told it as a joke. Some told it as a warning. Some said she had been foolish. Others said she had been brave. A few insisted Adrian had changed because he fell in love with the only woman who did not fear him. But Mira knew the truth was more complicated. She had not saved him. She had challenged him. Adrian had not become good overnight. He had chosen, again and again, not to return to the easiest version of himself. That was the real story. Not that a rude mafia boss became gentle because of love, but that a fearless woman looked at a man built by cruelty and refused to worship his damage. She forced him to understand that power without restraint was just fear wearing a crown. And Adrian Volkov, who had once been feared by every person in the room, learned that the greatest thing a powerful man could earn was not obedience. It was permission to stay. So when people asked Mira if she had ever been afraid of him, she would look across Belladonna at Adrian sitting at an ordinary table, waiting for a decision as if a voice mattered more than his empire. Then she would smile and say the line that became the restaurant's legend. "I was never afraid of monsters. I was only afraid of men who thought they had the right to own me." And every time Adrian heard it, he lowered his eyes first, not from shame anymore, from respect.